Hey there, Indie Warriors! Tangwystle here with a new review for you all. Today we'll be taking a look at Gamedec. Now, before I get into the review, I do want to give all our wonderful watchers and Indie Warriors a strong trigger warning. This game is an adult game with themes of sex, violence, exploitation, substance abuse, and other unpleasant stuff. So, if you are easily triggered, consider having a friendly Indie Warrior watch the video for you. Alternatively, you're welcome to join the Discord or leave a comment and inquire if your particular trigger issue comes up, or skip the video entirely. We understand. Alright, trigger warnings out there, let's get into the nitty-gritty. Gamedec is a single-player cyberpunk isometric investigative RPG based on a book series of the same name by Polish author, please forgive me my pronunciation, Marcin Sergiusz Cibołek. Gamedec, the word, is a job and a portmanteau of game and detective, which sums up the game pretty well. The story itself is a fairly standard blend of cyberpunk and private investigator. As a Gamedec, you investigate client issues within fully immersive VR games online. I don't want to spoil things, so I'm going to try to avoid any details of any cases beyond the very first one, and even for that one, I'm going to try and not give too much away. But I want you to get an idea of what sort of stories and cases you'll be dealing with. Think of your character as a cyberpunk version of Dick Tracy, Sam Spade, or Sherlock to a certain degree. You get a case, you start asking questions, and you don't know if people are being honest, lying, or they themselves are simply misinformed. You might go up against hackers, people exploiting bugs, or other players, or you might be hired by someone who is up to no good at all. This game is very open in its variety of choices, with no real judgments built into the game. The world simply reacts based on your choices. Usually. More on that later. The world building itself is a big part of the game, as you would expect. It reminded me a lot of being a decker in Shadowrun, for those who are familiar with that title. The game has its own lingo, and a lot of it, but it will give you plenty of lore entries and definitions. Arguably, too many lore entries. Now, normally, I am a very eager and avid little lore whore, and proud of it, but with Gamedec, I never really got a strong connection to the lore, at least not after 12 hours of play. I got attached to small pieces of the world, but not the world as a whole, really. There was just too much of it too fast. I might have been okay with this, but either due to rough translation or just plain bad writing sometimes, a lot of it is very flat and tedious to read. There's also just a lot of it to read, and I say that as someone who enjoys reading lore in games. Some entries are transcripts of interviews, others seem to be online threads or entries from in-world texts, and a lot of names get dropped. Names for people I don't know anything about, but I suspect they're from the books. However, as someone who hasn't read the books, I need to be introduced to these background characters through gameplay, or at least with a footnote through an introduction in the first piece of lore I get that can do the job. Introductions are important. And that is especially true when you're informing players or readers about a lot of world-building elements. If you don't give me a reason to care, then I don't care. It's that simple. And overwhelming me will also burn me out on my ability to care. Because when I started, my first dozen, maybe 20 lore entries, I gobbled them up. I loved every word, except when the writing was rough. But it just kept coming, and a lot of it was obvious stuff, like Realium refers to offline reality, and Virtualium refers to the virtual reality. I don't need an entry with an exclamation point for all of the world-specific vocabulary. Now, all that said, I did end up caring quite a lot about quite a few characters, and the world itself is fascinating. I just needed it to slow down a little on info dumping and stop trying to tell me everything at once. Controls are point and click with the mouse. That's it. No WASD, just point and click or hold down to keep moving. You click on items and people, click on options, or you can use a number key for options. It's really nothing fancy here. Pretty standard MO for an investigation genre style game. Mechanically, gameplay is also very straightforward. You run around, find a thing or a person, and investigate or ask questions. How you investigate and what questions you can ask change as you fill out your professions in the skill tree. You earn points to invest in the skill tree by making choices that reflect the different stats. I won't dig deep into all of them, but the red flame icon, for example, will earn points from choices that show determination, authority, selfishness, and indifference, among other things. There's no good or bad meter in this game. Each personality aspect has a variety of characteristics that allow you to play how you want, rather than forcing or nudging you into a clear archetype attached to a particular profession. Gotta give the game props, again, for thoughtfulness. It is very open to what you want to do as a character and as a player. Beyond the simple act of acquiring information, the detective aspect is really well done. Once you've got your clues, you can make deductions. Now, sometimes it's possible to collect every clue, but I'm pretty sure there are also times where it's not possible. For example, you have to be friendly with someone to get a clue, or you can be hostile and get a different clue. Sometimes you can manage both, but it's tricky. However, it feels very natural as well, coming back to that idea of the world simply reacting to the choices you make, without judging you for them one way or another. It reminds me of Fable, but without the moralizing of NPCs and with infinitely more depth and complexity. The game mechanics of clues and deductions also has phases of the investigation, and can lead you down false trails, but still get you to the right place in the end. Deductions in Phase 1 will lock or open certain avenues of investigation in Phase 2, and so on. For example, the first time I ran the first mission, I incorrectly deduced my target's in-game name, and that slowed me down a bit, but I was still ultimately able to complete my objective without feeling railroaded about it. That's a difficult balance to strike, and I give the team credit for finding it. Graphically, the backgrounds and details to the levels are pretty darn sweet. The color palettes reflect the dark, gritty, and neon elements of a cyberpunk aesthetic. Nothing cutting edge, but I found them very visually appealing and reminding me of Shadowrun, once more in a good way, not a copy-paste way. Characters are small, and you don't see much detail unless there's art up for someone you're talking to, but that's par for the course with just about any narrative-driven isometric game. Side note, regarding level design, they're pretty small feeling, and I'm not sure why exactly it makes my computer run a little warm as I meet recommended specs. On one hand, I would have liked a larger, more open feel to the level design, but on the other, having to run around and around and around, looking for clues, talking to people over and over, finding new clues, talking to people again, it's probably a good thing they didn't make the levels bigger. They also have options in the settings menu for accessibility relating to dyslexia, color blindness, and font scaling. That last one I appreciate a lot because my vision is pretty terrible. There was a minor issue with jagging on my monitor from time to time. I tried the game at all settings from low to high, and I meet the recommended hardware. Possibly it's an issue with my monitor, and overall it was a very minor graphical issue for me, but it was there. My only other issue with graphics is that a lot of character art seemed to be missing. Mainly this was for very minor side characters, but if they're not important enough to warrant art, just leave that part blank. Why put what looks like a placeholder in there instead? Possibly they will add more art later, but it did give the game a slightly unpolished and incomplete feel. That roughness was also apparent in other areas of the game. Gender references were often inconsistent, although there did seem to be a pattern of using the apparent gender identity pronouns for a character. Ramon is the best example I have. The game bounces between he and she. Maybe Ramon is gender fluid. I don't know. More obviously, though, the game would sometimes misgender me. Me, the player, the main character, whose gender was identified in character creation. I'm not personally offended by this, but there are people who will be, and after making a point of letting me choose my gender, it would be nice if the game respected my identifier. It was never intentional feeling either, like if someone had been rude to me in-game and misgendered me as a way to be rude, Okay, fine. That character is an asshole, but that's an element of that gritty realism I really appreciated about the game overall. This just felt like an overlooked bit of coding or scripting or whatever. That feeling was echoed in choices sometimes as well. Most of the time, the game was really good about reflecting the fact it remembered my choices and the clues I had discovered, but sometimes it wouldn't. For example, when I chose not to go to the police about a particular case, it ended up on the news the next day anyways. Now, maybe that was because I didn't kill the character I chose not to turn in, but I'm pretty sure no one let him go, and he didn't seem the type to go to the cops anyways. It felt like an oversight. Two biggest offenses, though, were the text box that had text for both the male and female player identification crammed together in the same box, and once in a while the original Polish would show up instead of English. If I was just doing an impressions video, I could let stuff like this slide for an alpha build, but this is a review, and the game is supposed to be review ready, i.e. ready for release level of complete. It's not. There was also the 2 pumpkin plants in harvest time that I got stuck between and had to shut the game down and start a new file because I couldn't move. That did only happen once, and I probably planted hundreds of those pumpkins, so make of that what you will. I am not known for having very good luck, and have managed to crash games no one I know has ever had a problem with. It could have been a one-off, and I was not able to recreate it despite a solid hour of farming them for in-game currency. In-game currency. Insert gameception joke here. Music and sound effects are pretty bland and unobtrusive. You get nice digital sounds when you're interacting with electronic devices, and in the game Harvest Time, which was set in a Wild West-style farming community, the environmental sounds of NPCs and animals were pretty darn glorious. Once in a while, the music would pick up, but it never wowed me. I also never really noticed its absence either, though. Gamedec is one of those quieter, narrative-driven games that can get away with this lack of notable background music. Alright, Indie Warriors, final thoughts. The world is massive, to the point of being a little overwhelming with all the new lingo like Rillium, Virtualium, Zonet, and so much more. I love the world, but please stop shoving lore down my throat. It's nothing particularly innovative, but it's very cozy for anyone who enjoys a gritty cyberpunk setting. The game needs some heavy polishing, but it is playable, unless you get unlucky. The writing is painfully rough at times, but the dialogue shines and the characters feel like whole people, not cheap archetypes and cardboard cutouts. When it's awesome, it's superb, and when it's not, it's pretty cringe. And the two come together for something I enjoyed a lot, despite the moments of cringe. I do strongly recommend it for anyone who loves a deep world, interesting characters, and detective point-and-click. But I'd love to hear your opinion in the comments below. Will you be checking out Gamedec, or giving it a pass? Or maybe wait and see if they polish this diamond in the rough and make it really sparkle. Special thank you to the following Indie Warriors: Mitchell Hall, Bunny, Kevlo, Bill Takaz, Christian Cruz, Strict9, Chris Jackson, Nathan Moore, Peach, Adriana Amato, CJR, PSC, C. Coyle, Skepticism, Jen Rose, Jesse, CPM, Julian Colbus, and JRS the 8th. Thank you for watching I Dream of Indie. Your support helps to bring a voice to the voiceless ones in gaming. You can find info in the description below on other ways to support us, as well as a variety of links. If you want to catch future episodes, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell. Until next time, Indie Warriors, good luck and have fun gaming.